Hi, I'm Mike from Craft Supplies USA, and today I'm going to show you how to turn a sphere. Turning a sphere is a great project that uses up some of the scrap wood you might have lying around your shop. There are many methods for turning a sphere, including jigs that make it easier or more precise, but I'm going to show you how to do it using stuff that you've already got in your shop. They're also a perfect way to develop and hone your turning technique, and they're a great conversation starter. For this project, you'll need a dry blank for your sphere, a blank at least 1 inch larger for a jam chuck, turning tools, a ruler, calipers, sandpaper, and a finish. We'll include a link in the YouTube description for everything used in today's video. For this sphere, I'm going to use a piece of figured maple that's 3 by 3 by 4.5 and will result in a sphere that's roughly 2 3/4. This method can be used to turn any size of sphere, just scale up or down as needed. Start by mounting your sphere blank between centers. I'm using the 4-prong and 60-degree centers that came with the lathe. Place the tool rest close to the blank, about center height, then make sure the blank won't contact it before starting your lathe. Then use a spindle roughing gouge to knock off the corners with the lathe running around 1500 RPM. Take light cuts with the flute slightly closed, working from the center towards the ends. Once the corners are knocked off, speed up the lathe to around 2000 RPM and continue turning. You can place the tool on top of the spinning piece and listen for flat spots to know if it's round without stopping the lathe. Stop as soon as the blank is round. Use a skew laid flat on its side to turn a tenon. This is how you'll hold the piece on your chuck, so size it to fit your jaws. Remove the blank from the lathe. Place your chuck on the headstock and tighten the jaws on the tenon. Then bring in the revolving center for support. Next, use your skew to square the other end of the blank. Now we'll mark out our sphere with some calipers. Open the calipers until the points fit over the blank. Then, place the calipers with one point on the end of the blank and make a mark about 1/8 of an inch past the other point. This will be the edge of the sphere. Next, measure your calipers and close them to half that distance. Mine measured to about 3 1/16, so I'm setting mine to just over 1.5 inches. Use this measurement to mark the center of the sphere. Rotate the piece by hand to create lines on your marks. These marks don't have to be exact, just get close. Now we'll begin turning the sphere with a spindle gouge. Start with the flute open, then roll the tool as you make the cut, closing the flute. On these longer cuts, start with the handle low and raise it as you turn the flute, working towards center. Stop your cut at the edge of the nub. Adjust your tool rest as needed to support the tool and turn half of the sphere. As it rounds into shape, take light cuts and don't touch the center line. Again, it doesn't have to be exact, just get it as close as you can. Once that half is close to a sphere, use a diamond parting tool and part on the outside of your mark, leaving at least 1/2 inch for support. This will define the edge of the sphere and give you room to turn with the spindle gouge. Next, use your spindle gouge to turn the other half of the sphere. Use the same techniques and cuts as you did on the first half. Now that you've got a sphere that is very close to round, use your gouge to turn the nub down as small as you can with the revolving center still in place. Then, lay your gouge on its side with the fluke completely closed and carefully turn through the nub. Move the tailstock out of the way and finish the cut. Next, use your parting tool to part off the sphere. Start by turning it down to about 1/4 of an inch, then slow the lathe down to 1000 RPM and finish parting. Use your hand to catch the sphere as it comes free. Set the sphere aside. Now we'll turn a jam chuck. The jam chuck will be used to hold the sphere for the rest of the turning process. Mount your blank between centers and use your roughing gouge to turn it to round. Then use your skew to create a tenon like we did for the sphere blank, and mount the blank in the chuck jaws. Use a 1/2 inch spindle gouge or a 3/8 bowl gouge to open up the end of the blank. Remember that the piece is only supported on one end, so don't get too aggressive with the cuts. Once you've got most of the bulk removed, switch to either a skew or a scraper. I prefer a radius box scraper for this cut. Keep the tool handle flat and level as you turn. While you're hollowing out the jam chuck, maintain a few degrees of taper. That will hold the sphere perfectly in place. You'll see why that's important later on in this process. Stop the lathe and check your fit. The sphere needs to fit far enough in that your center line protrudes about 1/8 of an inch. Keep turning until the sphere fits snugly. Now turn the lathe off and insert the sphere until it fits firmly. Place it so the nub is accessible and able to be turned away. Switch back to your spindle gouge and lightly turn away the nub. Now comes the cut that defines this method of sphere turning. Use a narrow parting tool and make a 32nd inch deep cut on your center line. Stop the lathe and make sure the channel is visible all the way around the sphere. Once you've got a channel completely around the sphere, remove it from the chuck and rotate it 90 degrees. The channel is a perfect circle, and we'll turn to the bottom of the channel, ensuring that we have a perfect sphere. Set your speed to around 2500 RPM and use your skew to shape the sphere. Make very light cuts. If your skew isn't sliding very easily, apply some wax to the rest and the flat of the tool. For this cut, keep the tool flat and level and make sure you're moving side to side. The end of the handle should swing in a wide arc. Stop the lathe and check the channel. Once the outside of the sphere is complete, flip the skew over and work on the middle. Remember, we want to turn just until we can't see the channel anymore. Once you've finished the first half, remove the sphere from the chuck. Turn it 180 degrees and reseat it for turning the second half. Now that the sphere is slightly smaller, it's likely that it will seat too far in the chuck, making the center line unreachable. If that's the case, turn the end of your jam chuck down as needed with your skew. This is why we kept the inner wall at a slight taper. It allows us to shorten the chuck as needed and still hold the sphere securely. Insert the sphere into the chuck, then repeat the process with your skew. For a scraping cut like this, your skew needs to be nice and sharp. Stop and sharpen the tool as needed. Continue turning until the channel is completely gone. The middle of the sphere isn't quite done, but once again it's seated too deep in the chuck. Turn down the end of the jam chuck again until you have access to the middle. Use your skew to work on the center. Flip the sphere and approach it from both sides for the best result. Now it's time for sanding. With a skew, your final cut is very smooth, so you can start sanding with a higher grit like 240 or 320. Sand 1/2, then stop the lathe and rotate the sphere 90 degrees and keep sanding. Repeat this process, rotating the ball only 90 degrees at a time to eliminate visible sanding scratches. Continue this process and sand through 600 grit. Next, polish the sphere. I'll start with scratch-free on a clean rag. Polish the sphere, rotating at 90 degrees until the entire sphere has been polished. Once the sphere has been sanded and polished, I'll finish it with Odie's oil. Apply a generous amount with a clean rag. It'll act as a friction polish, so use moderate pressure. The heat will cure the finish. Rotate the piece and repeat until the entire surface is covered. Buff it dry with a clean rag for a final polish. Now the sphere has a nice warm luster. Now your sphere is finished. Get out in the shop and try experimenting spheres with different materials and different sizes. If you liked the video, give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more wood turning videos.